and make sure that we invest in the people who, in fact, need the help. People out there need help.
But why didn't you do it over the last 25 years?
Because you weren't president. Because you weren't president screwing things up.
You were a senator.
You're the worst president America has ever had. Come on.
You know, we commonly hear that there's never been a more polarizing time in the history of the United States than now. Is that right? To be honest, it kind of depends. If you stick around in this video, I'm going to share with you a little bit about the research and actual experience of polarization. Secondly, I'll also share with you 4 tips on how you can help reduce polarization in this moment. So first, are things as polarized as the media makes them seem? The good news is that research shows that we are actually less polarized than the media often portrays. Part of the business of media, right, is to draw eyeballs to either a cable TV station or to a particular website. And truth of the matter is that stories of conflict and stories of polarization tend to be better at doing that than stories of shared values and shared interests and overall equanimity. But actual research has shown that American people actually continue to have a lot of shared views on many, many issues. And so polarization is a problem. It's just not as extreme as the media might like you to think it is. Now, that's the good news. The second piece of news is less good, and that is that even though we're not as polarized as watching MSNBC or Fox News might make you feel, we are more polarized as a nation than we were just a decade ago. Now, there are many reasons for that. Actually, one of them is the media. The media has contributed to this polarization environment. But there are also some reasons why we have become more polarized in the past decade. One of them is the media and the media ecosystem. So social media platforms like Twitter or TikTok or Instagram, and indeed even cable TV, has resulted in people curating their media environments so that they're hearing news from just one source, and often a source that could be more extreme, and then they're seeing comments from people who hold the same views that they do. But secondly, right, there are demographic changes that have promoted polarization. Specifically, if we look, people have tended to move across state lines and into communities that are more homogenous. So if you take certain states that used to be perhaps more mixed with red and blue, we've seen many of those states either become more red or more blue. Related to this, congressional districting, so the rating of congressional districts so that they are more homogenous, has tended to reward people to take more extreme viewpoints in elections. And then lastly, the globalization of markets, the globalization of the economy, the globalization of education have all created more polarization, largely because within the United States, some of these divides have been along of what we would call haves and have-nots, right? Where the economic forces that have led to more extreme inequities in wealth have contributed to polarization. So none of these trends are encouraging, none of these are good, but we are not helpless to turn the tide. I want to talk with you about 4 things you can do to stem polarization. First, you can work actively to build relationships with people who see the world differently than you do. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but you just said we're living in communities that are more pure, more homogenous, right? How do I do that if I am growing up in the east side of Manhattan, or if I am growing up in a rural town in the South, and it seems to me like everybody think like I do or think like my family members do? It's a great question. So it is true that you might be in a geographically homogeneous environment, but you can use social media to reach out and discover people who do think differently than you do. But secondly, right, and related to that, there are many organizations whose work is building bridges across these lines of difference. Doing what you can to perhaps join a living room conversation or to connect with organizations that are working hard to create relationships and conversations across lines of difference is the first step you can take to reduce polarization. Secondly, even if you don't want to go that far, actively seeking out media sources that give you news and information from a diverse array of sources is really important. So I'll tell you one of the things I do. I listen to my regular domestic sources, but I have found that looking to an international media source, like the BBC, for example, or Euronews, is a way of taking really a global approach to how outsiders are seeing issues within the United States. And often that global approach seems to me to provide a more balanced and fair way of characterizing news. So each of us can do that. Third, this sounds easy, but I think it's really hard on a day-to-day basis, which is don't add fuel to the fire. If you're like me, you're probably part of some social media ecosystem where you'll see tweets of outrage from your political side about the other. And there are moments, right, when I'm feeling outraged about something and I am very tempted to hit retweet, or I'm tempted to copy a news article and share it with others. And what I realize, at least as somebody who really cares about reducing polarization, is even though I feel passionately about this, when I hit the retweet, I'm actually aiding and abetting polarization. So really taking a moment and saying, is this going to be constructive to building bridges across lines of difference? Is this going to promote greater understanding or greater outrage? And lastly, is really related to belief. Believing that your role, that the choices you make on a day-to-day basis around issues of polarization can make a difference. You know, there's all this research, for example, that shows that if human beings decided to actually act decisively around climate change, that we could stem the tide of human-created climate change. But here's what the research also shows. Most people believe that human beings will not make these choices and that their decisions don't matter. And it is that attitude that actually makes people not do their part. So the science says if we did it, it would happen. But if individual beliefs say it doesn't matter because we're not going to do it, then we won't do it. And I think the same is true for polarization. If we all did our part, whatever that is, engaging a hard conversation across a line of difference, not adding fuel to the fire, getting our news from different media sources, we could all collectively reduce polarization. But if we all say it's hopeless, then I think what we're going to see in this next decade is increasing polarization, increasing demonization, and probably an increase in violence and social unrest in our culture. So if you want to continue to learn how polarization is affecting governance in our country, watch this next video, which is how does political polarization lead to gridlock in Congress? Okay, so don't forget to subscribe to this channel, hit like and ring the bell. And don't forget, watch the next video, how does political polarization lead to gridlock in Congress? Okay, you want to know how polarization stops Congress from doing its work. Keep on watching.